Hey there, folks. My name's Scott the Dude, Twitch streamer, content creator, dungeon master, video gamer. In this series of videos, I want to really give some reflections just on sort of picking up the hobby of tabletop RPGs after about a 30-year break, and hopefully, sort of within that, share some of my learning on the go around being a new DM, setting up a game, running your first sessions, all that kind of thing. So in this video, I want to give you a bit of my backstory and a bit of sort of my journey about tabletop gaming, and talk a bit about getting started and maybe give you some ideas about how you could approach your own game. Cool. So way back in the 1900s, I played a bit of D&D and a few other TTRPG systems when I was in high school. Always played as a player, never played as a DM before. Back then we had a forever DM named Alan. I guess sort of thinking back to it, I was kind of really like a sort of repressed theatre kid. Like, I always enjoyed acting and being creative and all of that kind of stuff. But I was just a bit too shy, sort of lacking confidence to put myself out there and be in school shows and that kind of thing. So for the longest time, D&D and RPG was my outlet for that. And then, life moves on, and for a long time I was sort of busy being an adult and having a family, and I didn't really have an outlet for that side of myself, and that was fine. I had other things in my life. It was cool. But the desire to play D&D never really left me. It sort of got filed away as one of those things, it would be nice if kind of ideas. And then, sort of fast forward to 2020, during lockdown, I started streaming on Twitch and growing a community around playing Destiny, and that's primarily what I do. I'm a Destiny player. I did have a few kind of occasional forays into RPG like games like The Witcher and Skyrim and that kind of thing. So it was around that time that the idea of playing D&D really started to take hold of me again. And anyway, one day I went out and I was in a video game shop, and they had a little section of D&D stuff, and I picked up the Essentials kit with the intention really just of running like a home game, like with my wife and my kids. And then they sort of seemed into it, and then interest waned, and it ended up not happening. So I turned to my friends on Twitch and my Twitch community, to put a game together, and our adventuring party was born. So I guess that sort of brings me to my first tip. If you're going to put a game of D&D together, especially if you're going to DM that game, play with people you don't mind spending a good amount of time with. I know that sounds probably really obvious, but as a DM, your commitment to that game is likely going to be more than the sort of 3 or 4 hours every couple of weeks that your group gets together to actually run a D&D session, right? So for the sake of your own mental health, you want a group of cool people to play with, right? I got lucky. I got a great group, of people that I know, as I say, through Twitch. People with a real range of experience, right from like complete noobs, people who just had never played TTRPG at all before, up to some veterans and some people with a lot of experience. Everybody was willing, and everybody came in with a lot of enthusiasm, and coming from those sorts of different levels of experience has given us a lot of mix, in our group. So it's sort of made my life a lot easier, my job as the DM. So thinking about that, like, what is your job as a DM? So if you're new to Dungeons and Dragons, or like you're sort of being the person like I was, sort of putting themselves out there, saying sort of I'll DM because I want to play. What you need to kind of understand what that job entails, right? So the way I look at it, and what I've kind of come to realise after running a few sessions, is that you're as much of a player as the players are themselves. Their characters are your characters. You're working together to tell a story, which you, as the DM, sort of control the narrative pacing and any sort of big events and things like that. That's sort of coming from you as the DM. Regardless of whether you're running a homebrew campaign or whether you're following an official module, those bits in between the dungeon, the adventuring, where you're doing sort of character development, a lot of that's coming from you, as the DM. So although you play all the NPCs and that your party will interact with, and you'll play the monsters that they'll fight, you're not their enemy. I like to sort of think of myself as sort of a benevolent but wrathful god. Like, I'll work with you and I'll give you lots of cool shit, but I'm also going to send this band of orcs to attack you, and they're going to try and flay the flesh off your bones, okay? So it's sort of, above all, it's about being cooperative and helping to give each player the experience that they want to have, and creating those fun moments of character development, of danger, of comedy, of pathos, all of that cool stuff. Dead easy. One of the things I found, just as a reflection, that I've really loved about DMing, and why I think I would recommend it to anyone sort of seeking that kind of a creative outlet for themselves, is that I almost feel like I'm playing D&D like at every moment of every day. Like, I've literally been in work meetings or lying in bed or just like in the middle of making dinner, or like a conversation with my wife, or sitting watching TV or something like that, and a story beat idea will hit me, and I'll be breaking out the sort of virtual notepad to jot it down and all of that. So I guess the next tip is the DM, get organised. So you're going to need to keep track of a lot of information, right? And there are some great resources out there for running your games, and I definitely recommend that you use them. Personally, I really love D&D Beyond. It's as a resource excellent for keeping track of character sheets and dice rolls and blah blah blah. There's also loads and loads of resource in there in terms of the rules of the game and modules, and it's just an excellent resource. We also use, because our sessions are online, we use Roll20 for battle maps, and just Discord for chat to run our games. But the real key for me as the DM is to sort of keep the organisation of like my prep and the story side of things together. So I can be a pretty scatterbrained person, and organised isn't really a natural state for me. So I apply some of the techniques that I use in my day job to get organised to D&D. I keep session notes like they were meeting minutes. So as we're playing through a session, I'll make some bullet points on just like a bit of loose paper with a pen, because I'm old and that's how old people do shit, right? But what I do then is review that at the end of each session, and anything that I deem to be important or potentially useful at some point down the line, I'll transfer that across to a Trello board. So Trello's a free online resource that I use at work all the time to keep track of projects. Projects in this case being your D&D campaign. So it's just a good place to keep all of those threads tied together in one place. So I've got separate columns for main plot, for character, for sort of cool moments to work in, notes on NPCs, sort of just general DM notes. The list goes on. I think the point is that it's flexible and that it's easy to use, and I'm used to it. So it even has a mobile app, for those middle of the night flashes of inspiration. You can just break out your phone and make a quick note. What's then next going to happen is, once you've sort of got your group and you've kind of prepared the session, you're actually going to have to play the game, right? So the first thing that needs to happen is that your players are going to need to make characters. So kind of encourage your players, I think, sort of be sort of quite flexible and relaxed, right? Don't be rigid about any particular approach to building characters, I would say, because what you're looking for is you're looking for people to come and play with you, but you also want them to come back, you want them to have fun, and you want them to enjoy themselves and sort of get the experience that they want to have out of it, right? So if you're going to sit down and say, I want, 10 pages of backstory, and I want, that's not going to appeal to every player. So I would say encourage your players to come with at least an outline of what sort of type of character they think they'd like to play. And as I say, it's important to be patient with them and help them through that process. So D&D Beyond is excellent for this. It's the best way I've found to build characters because it walks you through that process really, really well. So remember, not everyone's going to understand or know, all the races or the classes or the subclasses that they have to pick from. So sort of be prepared to help them with that and be flexible with it. I had some players come with like a fully formed character, with a fully formed backstory, knowing exactly who their characters were, where they were coming from, where they wanted to go with them. Brilliant, right? And I had some players come with just like the skeleton of a backstory, and either of those are 100% fine with me as long as there's something in there that I can work with, right? So as I said before, as the DM, your job is sort of give the people the experience that they want to have, give them cool stuff to do, but a lot of that narrative you're going to have control of yourself, right? So there's an example. One character came with a pretty full backstory, just like ready to rock, had everything, had did lots of research, had looked at the lore, all of that stuff, which was really useful for me because it helped me understand who that character was. But then looking at that character's backstory, I've then been able to sort of link in a way that is attached to how they came about their powers and how they came about their abilities. And I've sort of just in the last couple of days even figured out a way to make that work as a sort of long-term story device. And how that character's going to develop is all going to be attached back to that. While for another character who came with quite a complete backstory, there are aspects of their past, like their own personal past as a character, that I'm excited to work in and embellish and take forward, and see how that plays out over our future sessions. So people coming with really full character backstories can be dead useful for that kind of thing. But then conversely, I have another player who came with quite a sort of loose backstory where her character has amnesia and she just wanted the story to develop in the game as we played. So I've sort of been able as the DM to flesh that out and kind of almost make like a completely secret past for this character. And rather than tell the player what that past is, she's agreed to let me sort of gradually drip feed that in quite a cool way, if I say so myself. But I'll do that over a lot of sessions. So that way she really gets to sort of roleplay that amnesia angle and really gets to look forward to those information drops when they come, because they're not going to come at every session. She's not going to quite know when they're coming. So, she'll be learning and developing her character as she goes and then reacting to the things that the little snippets that she learns as she learns them. So I think that's going to be a really cool way of doing things. I think the art of being a DM, as far as all of this stuff is concerned here, is just about how you work with your players and about communicating with them. So understand what they want and how they want their character to develop and go from there. Like, if you're not sure about how your cool new idea works for that character, then discuss it with the player. Kick it around a bit. If there are things that you want to keep secret, then you can have those conversations in a sort of general and vague way. But ultimately, I guess it's for you as the DM to kind of decide what works best for your overall narrative and for that character, and does it fit and is it going to be cool? So remember the rule of cool. If it's going to be cool, then it's going to fly, right? So taking us almost to ready to play. The last thing I would 100% recommend that you do before you actually start having game sessions is sort of have a game session, specifically a session zero. So there's nothing in any of the rules or the books or anything like that about it. But I would say definitely before you play, bring your party together, bring your players together, talk about what kind of game you want to have. What's everyone hoping to get out of the game? Do they want to just have like a hack and slash adventure? Do they want it to be heavy in the role play? Do they want to have, local politics play a part? Or do they just want to be, murder hobos or, all of that kind of stuff? Like, have that conversation with them so that you can then determine the pacing, the content, all of that stuff. That will really help you sort of inform what you need to feed in, what you need to feed into your narrative. It also gives you an opportunity to do that sort of necessary logistics thing that you have to do when you're dealing with any group of people, right? So how often are you going to play? When are you going to play? What are you going to do if someone can't make it? How many absentees are you going to carry before you cancel a session? I think as well, don't be afraid at that. So I did this after my session zero, is I sent the players away to sort of think about who their characters are, why they're together as a group, and whether any of them knew each other beforehand, before they came together as a party. And I said to them, have those conversations without me, and then if you think there's anything that I need to know about that you decide on in those conversations, then just let me know. So it gets them to start having in-character conversations, and that might help somewhere down the line with things like roleplay and with the characters' understandings of each other and what have you. And then since we had some inexperienced players in the group, I also put together a sort of basic you stumble across an orc camp type encounter, just to sort of demonstrate how combat works, and sort of give them an into the sort of main narrative of the campaign that we were going to be running, because it's still the campaign from the Essentials kit. We're still running a module, the Dragon of Ice Spire Peak, and I also let them level up to level 2. More importantly, because just at the start of our campaign, there are a couple of potential TPKs for level 1 characters, so I thought I'll let them start at level 2, just to sort of give them a few extra hit points and stuff that might come in handy. I think a good session 0 covers all of that stuff, and a good session 0 will really pay you dividends as the DM as you start into your first actual sessions. I think another tip, and I think this has definitely worked well for me, another tip as a DM I would say is, if you can and if you have the time, absorb as much D&D content as you can. See how other people do DMing. So there are plenty of YouTubers and streamers out there making first-rate D&D content. And yeah, Critical Role is a thing also, but remember that you don't have to be Matt Mercer, or you don't have to be any of the other DMs that you see out there. Take what you like from as many people as you can fit into your eyeballs. Mix that up in your big old cocktail shaker head and do your own version of it. Being authentic and being yourself is important, right? So if you don't want to do voices or like start chewing up the scenery, then don't feel like you have to. Being comfortable with what you're doing will make it easier to deliver what you want to deliver, and it will help people just sort of get along and enjoy themselves more. I think that's it for getting started. If you took anything away from this video or enjoyed it at all, please make sure to like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitch, where you can watch our D&D sessions live. The link's in the description below. And go and check out the videos on the YouTube channel of the first few sessions of our Dragon of Ice Spire Peak campaign. As I say, they're not perfect, and I'm still learning to DM myself, but hopefully some of what I'm learning might help you. Thanks very much, folks. I'll see you in the next one.